Been already waiting for a while, so apart from saying that thanks to NewsX for supporting this event, I won't say anything more. Over to you.
It's delightful to see such a large crowd, and I hope you were here because you wanted to hear us and not because this was supposed to be some other panel. However, welcome everyone to this very interesting session, which I hope is going to open many doors and raise many questions. Chutneyfication itself is a term which sits very uncomfortably on my tongue. I have to say, even though it comes from a very distinguished lineage, because Salman Rushdie himself has coined this word, and who can mess around with his coinage? But the fact is that when you make a chutney, you take the sharpness of a chili, the fragrance of coriander, you take the tartness of a lemon, and you mix it up. And a chutney is always meant to add zest to the dal bhat of everyday food. What I fear now is happening is that the tail has begun to wag the dog, and that we have all become so accustomed to speaking in 2, 3, perhaps even 4 languages. Oh, welcome, Tarun. This is our rock star called Tarun Tejpal. Welcome. No, what I was trying to say is, one, that I want to understand this whole phenomenon of chutneyfication. So what are we chutneyfying? Are we chutneyfying English with Hindi or Hindi with English? And so which language should feel threatened is one question that I want everyone to think about. The other is that Hindi itself is not a pure language. It has evolved from several languages, including Urdu, including Sanskrit, including Persian, and is in a constant state of evolution. So Hindi, when we speak of Hindi as one Hindi, is actually wrong, because there is Avadhi, Brij Bhasha, Khadi Boli, several variations of Hindi itself. And Hindi has always been a very accommodating and a very generously accepting language. So what if it is accepting English words now or allowing itself to be used in English? That's my other question. The third is that, is Hinglish a pan-Indian phenomenon, or are there regional variations? For instance, Kolaviri D. I don't know Tamil. What would you call that? So, Gujarati has its own variations. I'm sure Bengali has its own. Punjabi certainly has its own, as Tarun will tell you. These are very interesting questions which I hope to ask our very distinguished panelists today. Let me begin with Rita, who is actually the only true academic and who has actually once put together a conference on this subject, because she will be able to put a very good, how shall I say, an academic framework, or not an academic framework, but at least a reasonably civilized framework around what can otherwise become a very frivolous dialogue between all of us. So to Rita first, about this whole phenomenon of chutneyfication and where it is headed. Rita?
Thanks, Ira. Are you able to hear me right at the end? Yeah. My own engagement with what I was constantly listening in people's conversations, and a very ubiquitous, very pervasive, and an increasing sense of what the linguists would call code mixing, which is mixing of two languages. And it's an engagement that began by simply being interested in language and people and how they shape each other. And while I was looking at it as someone who had grown up on a staple diet, if you like, of Indian literature and Indian writing in English, one sort of debate that I wanted to push forward was whether this was part of an overarching phenomenon of indigenization of the English language, whether this was to be seen in the way English has entered into a dialogue, sometimes dominating, sometimes cohabiting the space that was hitherto different and discrete and separate. And it was doing that with Chinese, and it's doing that with language in Philippines, and it's doing it everywhere. So one part of it was to understand whether how do we see English in relation to the languages of the colonies where it went and dominated, but is now cohabiting the same space. But I was also interested particularly in the in the fact that there is a cohabitation of Hindi and English, which had so far seen each other as almost adversaries in the way we imagined our post-colonial nation state. And how, when you say pure bhi, pura bhi, you know, love aajkal and so on, तो वो जो पुराने झगड़े थे हिंदी और अंग्रेजी के, वो झगड़े सब कहाँ चले गए? और इन सवालों को ढूंढते हुए, I felt that people were using this term Hinglish, which appeared sort of very hip, very journalistic. It was being thrown around everywhere, and it only sort of seemed to evoke either mockery or a very celebratory kind of an stance, that here is something we are doing very interesting and very new. And I just felt that we needed to see what exactly was happening here, and whether we could see that not as sociolinguists and as culture studies academics, but something we needed to have a dialogue with the media industry about. So this conference, Chutneyfying English, brought together people from, and some of them are here, Gurucharan was with us, there's Prasun Joshi and so on. So we were trying to get people from media, advertising, cinema, who are some of the main drivers of what appears as a code-mixed Hindi, English, quote-unquote Hinglish language. And so some of the inquiries, Ira, that led us to that there isn't only one Hinglish. So let me just say that, and I'm also that this is not the first time a linguistic hybridization is happening. As you rightly said, Hindi itself carries with it Persian and Braj and so on, and that's true of every language. So there is nothing very new about this phenomenon. But I do think that some of the equations between Hindi and English have changed, and I do think that people, you know, in between 16 and 25, what may be roughly called the youth of India, in urban India, are speaking a lot of mixed language everywhere. And I do think that this has the potential of becoming one of the major languages of urban communication in India in the years to come. And therefore, it wouldn't do to take a very, quote-unquote, a purist stance and say, what the hell is happening? Are these people who don't know how to speak their languages well? At the same time, you can't be completely unreflective and mindless and say, because people are mixing, you know, we've arrived and it's all very great, and pat ourselves on the back, because some of it also has to do with selling certain kinds of products to the youth and so on and so forth. But I'll let my other colleagues bring those things on board.
Okay. Tarun is threatening to read 2 paras from one of his books. But the question I wanted also Tarun to answer is that he, as a writer, see, one of the great concerns that a lot of purists and academics have with this hybridization of languages is that literary languages are getting disturbed from their very set paths and their very classical lines. Now, Rupert Snell, I think, has made this point brilliantly, where he says that in Hindi there was always an upper register and a lower register. The upper register was for the Panditai Hindi, for the purist classical kind of Hindi, which was Sanskrit derivative. And the Bolchal ki Hindi, which was the street language. So the word kamra, for instance, would be used in everyday conversation, but there it would become kaksh. And kaksh then lent itself to other, portmanteau words, where you could join 2 purist words and make them into a kind of Sanskritized thing. That's what the initial, translators from English into Hindi in government departments, and the kind of Kantlangot and Lopat Gamini kind of Hindi that, although nobody speaks that, I've never heard anyone say that, mujhe Shwet Dhumrapan ki dandika de do if they want a cigarette. Nobody says that. But it became a way of making fun of a language which had already become socially inferior to another language. So the question I want to ask Tarun, and ask him to read from his book as well, is that is it possible to retain a certain literary flavor while you use this language, or somewhere does that get disturbed?
Well, I think, Ira, the distinction between the upper register and the lower register was collapsed with modernity. I mean, the challenge of modernity became, how do you take the lower register and treat it with the eloquence of the upper register, or give it the power and the immediacy and the resonance of the upper register. And from in the West, from Eliot and Joyce and so on and so forth, the challenge was always to take the lower, to take everyday life, to take the ordinary and invest it with the eloquence of great art. I mean, the idea of the highfalutin art removed from the grime and dirt of daily life was always a bad idea, but it has survived because there was a kind of panditry. There was a distinction involved between the reading and writing classes and the classes that just lived and ate and labored. And I think that kind of thing makes it almost imperative. The challenge for anyone, say for someone like me who writes fiction on the side, is always, how do I take the ordinary and the everyday, the quotidian, the muck and grime of the daily existence that we all lead, and how do you invest it with the power of art? I mean, so for me, that's the challenge. So I see actually no distinction. I see the endeavor to appropriate the sensibility of another language into the language in which you write as something that invigorates the language in which you write. Yeah? And the question for us who write in English is infinitely complex. I've said this earlier and I'll repeat it quickly. The problem with an Indian writer who writes in English is that the language English is actually not created to carry the reality of India. The English language reflects, its virtues reflect the traits of those who created the English language. It's a language of irony, it's a language of understatement, it's a language of cool. Those are the virtues of the English language when you write in English. But Indian reality is exactly the opposite. Indian reality is noisy, melodramatic, overblown. It is not, in a sense, constructed to carry Indian reality. So when somebody writes fiction in English, in that sense, in Hindi cinema, Bollywood or Tamil cinema, Indian cinema is far more in sync with the reality of India. It's noisy, overblown, melodramatic, emotional, sentimental. But the English language, the virtues of the English language are not that. So when you write in English and you wish to carry this reality, this overblown reality into the English language and deliver it with power and eloquence, it's a huge challenge. For someone like me, part of taking on that challenge is understanding how you can appropriate the rhythms, the sounds, the voices, the smells of Hindi or Punjabi, which would be my other languages, and I suppose they would be different for somebody who writes, whose second or first language is Bengali or Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam, how to appropriate those cadences, because those cadences in some sense are far truer to Indian reality, because they've existed within the Indian metabolism for centuries. So there is a challenge to kind of appropriate some of those cadences and infuse them into your English, and thereby actually make the English language representing an Indian reality far more authentic and powerful.
I'd like you to read a passage from your the first one.
I'll actually read something that vaguely pertains to this.
Okay.
This is really from my second novel, The Story of My Assassins. Without telling you too much, this is basically, this is a story of one of the assassins, and the assassins are all in some sense fall across the various fault lines of India. This particular assassin is someone called Kabir M. He's a Muslim, obviously, and his father was damaged by partition, and his father then wanted his son to acquire a secular, non-denominational, have a non-denominational upbringing. In other words, he didn't want him to be seen as a Muslim, and he wanted him to have English more than anything else, because he thought that would deracinate him enough to not ever be recognized and then by bigots and be victimized. And this is what happens to the poor boy, because he's sent to an English missionary school. The arithmetic and algebra he could manage, and Hindi he was good at. But English and every other subject, all of them taught in English, fried his brains. He was not alone in this. The entire school was full of boys whose brains were being detonated by Shakespeare and Dickens and Wordsworth and Tennyson and Memoriam and Daffodils and Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright and Solitary Reapers and Artful Dodgers and Thous and Forsooths and the rhymes of ancient mariners. The first counterattack Kabir M. made on English was in class 4, when he learnt, like the rest of his reeling mates, to say, how do you do, how do you do, the answer being, just like a daddu, just like a daddu. It set the pattern for life for most of them. English was to be ambushed ruthlessly when and where the opportunity arose. Its soldiers were to be mangled, shot, amputated wherever they were spotted. Its emissaries to be captured and tortured. The enemy of English came at them from every direction, in the guise of forms to be filled, exams to be taken, interviews to be given, marriage proposals to be evaluated. The enemy English had a dwarfing weapon. It made instant Lilliputians of them. Whenever it appeared on the horizon, they seemed to suddenly shrink in size. Their weapon of Hindi was a mere slingshot compared to the enemy's cannon. Some of them understood that if they could somehow keep themselves from shrinking, they would be able to take the enemy English on, beat it back, perhaps even show it its true place. But in practice, it never worked. The English weapon was much too powerful, and all their bravura and resolve dissolved in a moment, leaving them puny dwarfs. All they could attempt then were ambushes, and here too, many of them, in the course of their lives, would come to feel that the more enemy soldiers they killed, the more they seemed to multiply. Some of them were so completely ruined by English, so shrunk by its brutal onslaught, that they never managed to regain their true size, not even when the enemy was not around, not even when they were in their own place with their own people. Many of them tried to broker a truce with it, but there can never be peace between unequals. Their attempts to cohabit with it, master such smatterings of it as they could, only left them open to further ridicule. Of course, there were some boys, especially from the army cantonment, who spoke English as if they were pissing in the bushes behind the school wall, a flowing, gushing, casual stream, laughingly delivered. In the classroom, these boys chirped like bajrigas and answered questions with fluent orations that left Kabir and his mates scratching their heads. Turwant, the son of the motor parts dealer, called them chatter-putter chutiyas. I'll just finish this off. This is actually something that really... Though they were a class apart now, Charlie and Kabir remained buddies. So Charlie is a boy from the cantonment who befriends Kabir. Doing the same things, bunking school, watching films, scouring the bazaar, tormenting other students and teachers with their pranks. Then Kabir was detained for a second time in class 9. The fucking impossibility of English, of Julius Caesar, and something hardened in him irrevocably. The first threat of a moustache had appeared, and juniors who had once looked at him in awe now sat at his side. Meanwhile, Charlie's father had been transferred to Kashmir, and with his board results out, he had done brilliantly. Charlie had moved to modern school in Delhi for the last 2 years of his school life. With the ironic Bengali boy gone, Kabir, sitting in the last row of the classroom, the moustache deepening by the day, slowly lost his winning air of daring-do and outrage. He became a sullen, brooding presence, refusing to talk to his new classmates, still trying to hang out with friends who had moved on, increasingly maddened by Cassius and Brutus and Antony and the utter nonsense they spoke. Each time Father Michael strode into class and began to declaim, Kabir's head bloomed with murderous thoughts. Soon the boy developed a tic that was not to leave him for the rest of his life. He began to mutter to himself, and every now and then, in the classroom, on the sports field, at home, he would break into a thunderous oration of gibberish. How, thou, da, Lucius, Ducius, Chucius, forsooth the geezer in the garden of Caesar. How, thou, da, friends, Romans, countrymen, meri murgi tumhari hen, oh Brutus ki chutas mein mere palkishan ka jutas. How, thou, da. His father and mother looked at him in admiration, while his young mates brought up the chorus, friends, Romans, countrymen, meri murgi tumhari hen, how, thou, da. When the school decided to hold him back in the same class for the 3rd year running, it was the principal who folded his hands in front of Ghulam and begged him to take his son to another school, a Hindi medium one, perhaps the Islamia Inter-College. Just to conclude the point that I was in fact exploring in this, I mean, as I've grown older, I'm dismayed by the wreckage that English has created across this country. It has done many beautiful things, but it has also damaged. Now when I look back at my own school years, and I was one of the cantonment boys, you know, speaking English like pissing behind the schoolyard, I see how many incredibly bright boys were utterly devastated and destroyed because they couldn't get their heads around English. That was all. And I've figured in these last 15, 20 years of my life that if there is a class breaker, if there's a line that divides the classes in India, that line among caste and creed and so on is actually the English language. If you're born into the English language in a country like ours, you get a head start that almost nobody else will be able to catch up on for a very long time.
No, that's the point which I've always felt, that the great divider in this country is no longer caste. Yes, to a large extent it may be in rural areas in certain pockets of North India maybe. But the great divider in this country between those who are up there and those who are not there is the English language. In fact, one very important Dalit activist, Chandrabhan, has made a goddess, a temple to a goddess called Angrezi Devi. And he says that you should worship her because she is what opens the doors for every opportunity. Now the question that I want to ask Gurucharan is that English is by far the language of aspiration in modern India, in the India today that we live in. And therefore, rather than making fun of accents, which an earlier generation would, to say ki, oh, they say vanilla ice cream and violence instead of vanilla ice cream and violence. The idea is entirely in another paradigm. And to a large extent, the people who first understood this was, as Tarun explained, the Bombay cinema film industry and commercial advertising. You no longer, if you look at the advertising that Prasoon Joshi or Piyush Pandey does, Thanda Matlab Coca-Cola, you know, they're all words which bridge these two language cultures together. I'd like Gurucharan, since he's had such a long and very distinguished career in trade and industry, to tell us how commercial interests also now push languages to becoming closer to each other, to erasing those boundaries that kept one lot away from another.
You know, I think that, let me begin by saying that there are, I agree with what a lot of what Tarun has said and what you've said, but I also believe that you are not seeing the new reality of India. And so what I want to do is, let me begin by saying that your assumption about English, you talked about Hindi being accommodating. Actually, English is one of the most accommodating languages in the world. In fact, it is a very new language. It came up only in the 14th century. And when it first came up, it came out from the bazaar. The way English is coming out from the bazaar, the same way, because the church spoke Latin, the aristocracy spoke French, Normans spoke French. So English was a language where people, ordinary people in England from the bazaar wanted to translate the Bible into English, and they were burnt on the stake. But within 100 years, that English had produced Shakespeare. So that's the way we should think about it. And Shakespeare borrowed from every language that he knew. And today, English is really not the language of England anymore. It is not the language of America. It is a global language. And whoever owns it, whoever speaks it, no matter which way he might speak it, he owns that particular language. And let me just illustrate to you with one young boy a story that I told in India Unbound, my first trip that I took to a village in Tamil Nadu, and I met this boy called Raju. And during the course, he was 13 years old, he was low caste, wearing a bush shirt and khaki half pants. And he was serving us coffee. And as we became friends, he said, you know, I figured out the secret of life. And I said, what is it? He said, first, you must learn Windows. Second, you must learn 300 words of English. Sorry, 400 words of English. I said, why 400 words, Raju? He said, to pass TOEFL. Now, you know, I didn't know that you needed only 400 words, but then later I heard that President Nixon only knew 360 words. So Raju was not far off. But I think it's Raju's attitude that is important. When we were young, I was identifying with those scenes from Tarun. But today, Raju's 400 words is a kind of liberation. He's not worried about speaking the Queen's English. He wants to pass TOEFL. In fact, he thinks Windows is more important than English. And so Raju owns English. And sometime in the 1990s, English became an Indian language. We don't know how it happened, maybe connected with Manmohan Singh's reforms, or I don't know, but it has happened. And that is why, frankly, this idea of mixing words that we are discussing today, we've always mixed words. for generations, ever since English came into India. The difference was earlier, it was upward mobility. People wanted to rise, get good jobs, the lower classes becoming middle classes and upwards. Today, the democratizing of English and this language is that it has become the fashionable language of South Bombay, South Delhi, Bangalore, advertising, FM radio, Bollywood, and so on. So, as the fashionable language, it has a quality which has taken off on its own. Now, I prefer to use the word, Ira, English with an I, rather than Hinglish, which is the word that is commonly used for this language. And the reason I use the word I is because I think it's happening across the country, and it's not just English, Hindi and English, but it is predominantly, because the two trends, the biggest trends in India today, even all over, is the fact that English is going down the socioeconomic ladder, and so is Hindi. And Hindi is going down. And so what we are creating is like in the Mughal camps, Urdu was created, you know, by taking Farsi and taking the different languages of Hindi that you spoke about and made it into Urdu. And then it traveled to the Deccan with the Mughal armies. Now on the coattails of Bollywood, this language is going across the country. So what I'm trying to say is, Tarun, that the world you are describing, yes, is true, but I think it's a world of the past. The Indian of today is Raju. He is confident. He doesn't care how he speaks. It's the first, why the Dalit temple? The Dalit temple is very important because the Dalits have realized that their future is not with Shuddh Hindi. They associate the vernacular languages with oppression. And so they are going from a non-literate dialect straight into English, like the cell phone. A lot of people jumped in the cell phone to having no phone, with no landline, straight into the cell phone. So the first-time learner of English is going through that cell phone phenomena. And so I personally feel that we should give this language a chance. Now, this doesn't, I'm not propagating the idea that this is, everything goes, that chutneyfication is the end. What I'm propagating, we have to learn standard English, we have to become bilingual as a nation, truly bilingual. We are not truly bilingual as a nation. But I do think that this particular language of English is something that will become possibly, maybe in 100 years, we'll produce a Shakespeare of this language. Rushdie liberated India in many ways, Indian literature. With Midnight's Children was very, very important in terms of the way he was able to use words, but it was not English, not English with an I. It was a different kind of thing. I think we need to produce a Rushdie or later a Shakespeare of this language to really give it some cachet.
I have several questions about that. What I also want Rita now to go back to Rita is that nobody is disagreeing with the fact that, yes, this is a language that everyone is using. It's gone viral in that sense. What we are talking about is how languages form identities, because no language exists in a cultural vacuum. There is a definite form in your head, and you know, this is one of the, how shall I say, the aftermath of colonial past, that we slowly start to give up those things that were our identifiers. So fewer women are now wearing saris. Fewer people are now eating the kind of rich halwa puri food that was our festive food. You go to any wedding and you'll get the same matar paneer, butter chicken, blah blah blah, those flying rotis. I mean, there's nothing to distinguish a Bengali wedding feast from a Kashmiri wedding feast and so on. So we are homogenizing, and that, I think, is something that one gets a little worried about. Nobody can disagree with the fact that, yes, English and Hinglish, if we must use it, is now beginning to enter our lives in a very aggressive manner. But but where are we going from here? One little thing to Rita, and then to you, Tarun.
No, there's almost a deja vu I'm having once again here. Each time this conversation comes up, there are those who will sort of moan about the hegemony of the English language, and then there are those who will sort of celebrate its. I'm not sure I want to see this issue in such polarities. I think there is what interests me is, why do people do what they do? For instance, my current work is in Indo-Pak villages along northern Kutch in Gujarat, and in the most remotest part of this village, where this woman does not have electricity in her house, and they're extremely poor, and it's sort of absolutely way out near the border zone. And she uses words like, you know, uski buddhi khatam ho gayi hai, recharge karwane ki zarurat hai. So the fact that this word recharge has entered into her vocabulary gives you a sense that some encounter with change has happened. And I'm interested in that. I'm interested in, I think, so if you're asking questions about identity, Ira, I think those questions about identity need to emerge from our listening to people's languages. And to see at one level, of course, how multilingualism has shrunk in India. Right? I don't agree with Gurucharan that we are not truly bilingual. In fact, what is unfortunate is that we used to be far more multilingual. I remember Mrinal giving this talk at the Vodafone Crossword, and she mentioned how her grandmother spoke 7 languages. We speak 3, our children will speak 2, and chances are our grandchildren may barely speak 1. So that is a huge concern. But having said that, what is interesting is what kind of words are people using in their English when they speak, when they use a Hindi word or a Tamil word. And I'm expanding here the definition of English to mean not only Hindi, but also to mean all kinds of hybridizations that happen in language. What are these words? So that when Gulzar writes, kajrare kajrare tere kare kare naina, तो वो जब सवाल आंखें पर्सनल से सवाल करती हैं, यू कुड नॉट से आंखें निजी सवाल करती हैं, आंखें व्यक्तिगत सवाल करती हैं, क्योंकि वो बड़ा अजीब लगता है. द सेंस ऑफ द पर्सनल एंड द पब्लिक comes to us with English language. That is also a technology of the English language, so that whether it is a student studying in a Gujarati medium or a Hindi medium, when she wants to say that, you know, Rita ma'am, मैंने अपने parents को कहा कि मुझे भी अपनी space चाहिए, वो space हमेशा अंग्रेजी में ही कहा जाता है, वो कभी हिंदी या किसी और भाषा में नहीं कहा जाता. So what are these technologies which come into your language not only through the train and a cup and a bottle and a cell phone, but also certain ways of looking at the world? I do think that the issue is very, very interesting and very complex, and perhaps its inquiry needs to emerge from, first of all, our familiarity and comfort with the many languages of India, our patience to hear it and to see where are these shifts taking place. The larger question, of course, is when you hear people taking recourse to one or the other language without, this is the question, without quote-unquote wanting to, or without quote-unquote being able to speak that one language continuously for 10-15 minutes. I mean, the 4 of us are speaking right now in English, but chances are that when we go out for a cup of coffee or chai or whatever, we would be switching over. We would be using far more Hindi or some other language in our interaction. So the point is, are we doing what we are doing because we are not competent to speak in one language for a continuous period of time? Or are we doing what we are doing because unconsciously many things have happened? Colonialism happened, and globalization happened, and the relationship, the old fight between, you know, Hindi as a language of the North and English as a language of the South, and what have you, those changed. But very, very importantly, and that is where I do agree with Gurucharan, I think our ambivalence about the English language has certainly undergone a shift. I think that we wanted it, and yet there was unease about admitting it. I mean, R.K. Narayan has this famous story about English language who's being tried out in a court, and there are many charges being laid at her door, and she's being told that, look, you divided this world, you divided our Indian society between those who knew Shakespeare and those who don't know Shakespeare. You did this, you did that, and I think tumko desh nikala diya ja raha hai, tum nikal jao is duniya se. The judge is saying this to the English language, and she says, dear sir, I promise you I will wear a sari and big bindi, and I will continue to stay in this country, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just tell me how long can I stay here. And he says, the court is you're around for the next 15 years, and I don't know what happens after that. Almost as if the matter could not be decided upon. You couldn't tell very clearly that you are here to stay. We might as well do things with you. We bend you, we rock you, we twist you, and we make it your own, or we throw you out. This ambivalence about the English language, I think, is diminishing. And that, I think, is a very, very significant shift. But really speaking, I do think that the issue is much more complex, and it goes into too many other things than simply being, if you like, the dominance of the English language or the democratization of the English language. I'm not sure I'm happy with either of the two discourses.
Thank you. That was very well put indeed. Tarun.
You know, languages will live and die by their use and virility, and it's been happening since the beginning of time. I mean, nobody speaks Sanskrit, nobody writes Sanskrit, nobody speaks Latin, no one writes Latin, and it's true. And there is no value judgment to be made on that. It's how things are. Things will survive if they have traction as a language among speakers and users, and when they lose traction, they just lose traction. The thing what we are trying to get at here, I think, really is to try and analyze the metabolism of what English has meant in India and what it continues to mean. And the truth of the matter is two things. One that Gurucharan mentioned, and one that was mentioned by Rita. The fact is that in the hierarchy of languages, English is economic and cultural supremacy that has actually ensured that we all crave the language. It's as simple as that. I'm not again going to put a value judgment to it. Any piece of English that you can scrounge, pick up, imbibe, gives you cachet. And that's how it is. And so we all, at all levels, look to imbibe, as she gave that example of the people at the border who says, recharge karenge, catches that word, is happy to use that word, is happy to own that word, because the word is an aspirational, word from an aspirational language. So it's the hierarchy of English that still sets it apart, and that forces all of us to move upwards to try and imbibe English. As for the story of Raju, I mean, Gurucharan, my only issue is I think we can be too sanguine in imagining that the story of Raju is a rosy story of how we are wonderfully going forward and embracing English and being rendered that much more eloquent and powerful by it. Actually, there are enough Raju stories of Rajus who are completely devastated by the fact of having to deal with English and having to overcome and deal with a language that is hugely alien to them, to their upbringing, to their birth, and it pretty much mars their entire lives. And I'm saying that's an ongoing struggle. So when Rita says that the ambivalence is lessening to the extent that it is seen as a language of success. And that is true. Who can doubt that? Every single day of our lives is made clear to us that English is the language of success. How can anybody be ambivalent about it? But does it still continue to do a great deal of damage to people who do not have that language easily, or don't own that language? It is absolutely true. People struggle with it. Again, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm reading the landscape. I'm saying that is the truth of the landscape, that across this country, there must be 800-900 million people who struggle because they can't actually appropriate language with the facility that 50 million people can. And so that's at one level. But as a writer, as a literary novelist, I mean, let me finish with that too. For me, as a literary novelist, the use of English, or as English with an I, as Gurucharan puts it, it is a fascinating challenge. For me to somehow be able, and what do you do there? I mean, there is always the threat. And let me just say that before Salman Rushdie, there was a man called G.V. Desani. He wrote a book in 1948 called All About H. Hatter. It's not very well read, or very well known now, not read that much. But in a sense, the true progenitor and precursor of Midnight Children is all about H. Hatter. He wrote that book in 1948, and someone no less than T.S. Eliot called it a masterpiece. He's called it a breakthrough. And what did Hatter do? To those who most of people who would not have read it, fundamentally what Desani tried to do was to make that first attempt to appropriate Indianism into the English language and create a literary piece with it. The book is uneven. It's very important for those who are interested in literature to read it, but the book is uneven in its successes. It's uneven because there is a threat that we still face, and we still fail at its doors, even today as writers, a threat of caricature, a threat of being cardboardy, because when you try and push, and I agree with Rita, not just Hindi, but any other language into the English language, in an attempt to invigorate it and render it more authentic, you also run the risk of creating caricature. I'm afraid that some of Rushdie's later work would probably fall into that category. And I'm not blaming him again, because when you live far from the street, when you live far from the sound of it, which is present in India everywhere, it's very difficult to replicate it. In Midnight Children, he caught it from his early years in Bombay, and he caught it really well. But I don't think it's possible anymore, because it's out there. As a writer, you struggle to somehow
catch the rhythm.
Yeah, catch that rhythm and invigorate your language with it without destroying the fundamentals of the language you're working in. I mean, English has a complex set of fundamentals. Its rhythms, its idioms, its metaphors, its tonalities. You have to somehow hold on to that, the basic framework, and then inject into that this incredible tonic of Indianism and Indian words. And that's a huge challenge. When you succeed, it's heady. When you don't, you turn out trash.
Can I make a tiny response to Tarun? That particular story, I agree with you that recharge is about, it is an aspirational quotient, right, in our language. But it's also her reality, Tarun. It's also the fact that there is, even with very meager income, living in a land that she does, landline connections are not available, but she can get a SIM card for a cell phone. So it's both things.
No, but Rita, in what language is the reality delivered to her? Where does the word rechargeable come from? So there is a company called Airtel or Vodafone that sends out that message to this person in a word called rechargeable. I'm saying reality is being delivered to this person in a language because that language is the dominant language. It's the language at the top of the hierarchy of languages.
But how is that different from the train or whatever other technologies that came to us with
the same. I'm saying that. I'm saying you're talking because English sits at the top of the hierarchy of languages. It's why writers who write in English get 50 times the advances that writers who don't write in English get.
But it's
not because they're better writers.
Hang on.
You know, they're not because they're better writers.
But it's not as if she had another Kutchi word for recharge, which has now been substituted by an English word recharge.
I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, I'm again reading the landscape. I'm saying these words are coming to people because it is the dominant language, and they will continue to come. And even the assurance that the ease with which people use it has to do more with economic assurance.
No, we all use the word tension ho gaya, stress ho gaya. Even people who would not know. My mate comes and tells me, "Mujhe bahut tension ho gaya, mere headache ho raha hai." These are words which there possibly are Hindi
because they're also cool. You will happily say, "He kicked my ass." How many people do you know would happily say in public, "He kicked my chutar"? I mean, I'm saying because you're cool. I mean, it's at the end of the day, English remains an aspirational language for everybody.
Yeah, you know, but I think the mistake we are making to some extent is to believe that we are unique in the world. Now, we are unique in many ways. But this problem that we are talking about, the hierarchy of language, is a problem faced in many, many countries because English has become the global language of power, the language of economy, of if you are going to have a top-notch job in France, I see Mark there, or if you're going to have a top-notch job in China or Germany, you need to be fluent in English. And so every mother in every country knows that if her child does not learn English, he's not going to go to the top of the ladder. Now, so therefore, this problem we are talking about is not really unique to us. The French, of course, have their own way of solving it by Académie Française, and they just excise. I mean, the French, the more the Académie Française wants to make French pure, the more the French are using English in their daily life. So therefore, this is a phenomena. As you said, Tarun, the languages evolve. Evolve, and only thing I have a problem is when you're talking about wounding, and you're talking about, what you're not looking at is the future. And you're not, the Raju is not a Raju on itself. He's basically the India which is growing at 8%, which is producing people with a lot more self-confidence. And so what I'm just suggesting here is that we should not fall into the trap of the language chauvinists who are insecure. The fact is that languages, rich languages like Kannada, Telugu, these languages are not going to disappear as they worry about. These are great languages. What the future really for us is, yes, chutneyfication is good. English with an I is going to grow. But at the same time, it's very important that in our schools, we do learn a standard English and we do learn a standard, our own mother tongue. I don't want to aspire to 7 languages. As long as we can become truly bilingual with these 2 languages, with 2 languages, I think we will be fine. And so let's not get into the mistake of either the politicians. You know, when Mulayam Singh Yadav wanted to get rid of English, he lost the Muslim vote. Why the Muslim vote in UP? Because in every Muslim mohalla, kasbah, there was an English private school. And the Muslims, rickshawalas and everybody knew that you had to get ahead while learning English. And so he stopped. He has not stopped. And that's one thing. Mayawati, when she first came in as Chief Minister, first act was allowing English to be taught from the first language. Can I interrupt
you here, please? I think we're going off into many directions and into areas which we can debate separately. Since we have only a little time left, I can only take in 5 questions. I'd be very grateful if you'd stand up, make your question brief, and we'll take the 5 questions and answer them. The lady in the white, please.
I'm not going to be able to walk through this, so you'll have to pass it.
First the lady in white, then that gentleman at the back. Yeah.
I'm Surekha. I agree with Mr. Gurucharan Das very much. And I wonder if this thing about English being encroaching into Hindi and other languages and making the less English ones feel insecure, I wonder if it's really a perception. And that perception is right now becoming much less, but it's a perception oft repeated, I feel. My question is, at college I had an American professor who was teaching education, and the topper in the class, Hindi medium student, left after 3 days. And he called me and asked me, because I was the class leader, why did she leave, Surekha? And I said, Sir, Father, because she couldn't understand your English, your pronunciation. So he said, pronunciation and language, what are they? They're nothing. I mean, I've been communicating with all of you. Tell me, did you understand me the first day? I said, no, Father, not at all. Do you understand me today? I said, yes. So that's it. Language is just mere communication. There's no big deal about that. I think, yeah, so I would like people to think about that, whether language is such an issue. It is just a communication.
The boy there, yes.
I'm Shubhranshu. Considering that the Constitution framers formulated a linguistic division of our states, and we see that multilingual character disappearing, and English is sort of being coerced in our everyday and professional life, do you also think it is also because the level of debates in our parliament is so slow, is so low, because speeches in vernacular languages is not allowed or practiced, and although we do find a lot of rhetoric and jingoism in the speeches, which is so particular about a speech per se, the level of speech of parliamentary debates would go high if the vernacular practice would be allowed, and we would probably be seeing parliamentary debates as piece of literature as well.
Is there a question there? There's a question here in front. Now, I've had two from the back, now two from the front, and that's it. I'm sorry, we have no time otherwise to answer them. Here, right here. Two girls.
My name is Mohini. I just wanted to say that there's this sense of shame attached, I've seen, to the Indian accent or to the pronunciations of English words. I just wanted to know, like I've heard someone say that, if I make a mistake in Bengali, it's funny. But if I make a mistake in English, it's shameful. So I just wanted to know, why do you feel there's this kind of embarrassment or shame attached to the Indian? Because I don't think it's there anywhere in the world.
Oh.
Everyone has their own ways of speaking English.
Yes?
I'm glad you
and
said
there's
that.
One lady here, yeah. I'm sorry.
It's a question for Rita, actually, because you were talking about young people mixing Hindi and English a lot. I've noticed that really only happens in Mumbai or Delhi, where they start a joke in English, they finish the punchline in Hindi. In the south, in Bangalore, I can tell you categorically, no one suddenly slips into Kannada or Tamil or Malayalam. So if the language you speak affects how you are and how you think, is there some big difference between young people in the north and the south then?
Okay,
I think we should
there were 4 questions asked. We'll go in reverse order. So Rita, would you like to take
Yeah, I'll take the last one first, since that was specifically addressed to me and which partly got answered here. While I was working on this, in fact, I traveled to a lot of cities just to get a sense of whether I was very, very off the mark. And I'm not saying there is a particular kind of English you hear in the north. You see the same variety elsewhere. I've already said we are not talking of one kind of already given brand of English. But even a mixture of words, she mentioned Kolavari. You hear when you're traveling in Karnataka, you say, hey macha, yeah, search madi. The point is, there is a certain kind of hybridity which is happening everywhere. Its measure may be different, its manifestation may be different. So let me just park that answer here, and I just want to say to this young man who said something about multilingualism is shrinking because we got divided along linguistic. I don't think one is talking about multilingual, one is talking about same person being able to speak many languages. That is the multilingualism we are talking about. And I don't think that shrunk because we imagine India as a linguistic form, we came up as linguistic states. I don't think that has any relation with that at all. It has to do, and really speaking, it goes back to what Tarun mentioned earlier, the business about accent and even the business about this sense of shame. It has to do with the wreckage that he was speaking about. There is no getting away from that question. That psychologically, there is this huge thing we carry on ourselves. So you do not feel, if you don't feel bad about making mistakes in your Hindi or Bengali or whatever mother tongues you speak, I think that's such a shame. I think it is a pity.
Tarun, would you like
The
to add to
mistakes
that?
we carry, sorry. No, you have the last word. The mistakes we made, the shame we had, the difference is it's precisely the advent of English with an I, or Hinglish, which is taking away this shame, because when Raju says 400 words of English is all he needs, he is not paralyzed by the English language the way we were. When we were growing up, my God, we had to speak it in a certain way. And if you did not, there was shame. But this generation doesn't feel it quite the same way. There will always be some kind of shame. But this generation has been liberated.
Gurucharan, I'm not too sure you're entirely right, because the girl who asked this question is definitely of this generation. She couldn't be more than 22. And she's certainly from an elite background. So if she and her friends still feel the shame when they mispronounce a word or misuse a word, it means there is a kind of lingering damage that goes on. I'm in complete agreement that it will be in abeyance, but it's early days of this process. I just want us to be able to recognize people like you and I come from we come from within the canon. We have a great sense of security about the English language because, one, we are the greatest beneficiaries of the English language, and we are also users of the language at the cutting edge of the language. But we have to, all I'm pleading for is a recognition of the fact that at the margins, the absence of this language or the craving for this language or the suzerainty of this language continues to torment and damage millions of Indians who are still trying to acquire it. And I'm not putting a value judgment on it. I'm saying that's the landscape.
I think that the concluding remarks made by everyone and the answers that they gave to the questioners have very successfully put an end to any further debate on this. We've run out of time. I'm sorry. We'll have to wait till next year for completing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, Gurucharan ji. Thank you, Rita. And thank you very much, Ira, for moderating.